Hello and greetings from sunny Colorado. I'm Jerry Bisbee, and I'm delighted to be here today sharing on the topic of the glass ceiling and 10 things I think you should know about women in leadership. For anyone who may not be familiar with the term glass ceiling, the dictionary's definition is an unofficial acknowledgement or barrier of advancement in a profession, especially affecting women and members of minorities. Before delving too deeply into our topic today, I'd like to share a little bit about myself. My name, again, is Jerry Bisbee, and I'm coming to you today from a suburb of Denver, Colorado, in the United States. My background is in the field of education, where I've served as an elementary teacher in the classroom and as an elementary principal, my most recent school having nearly 700 students and over 60 staff, as well as having served on the board of one of Colorado's largest online schools. I'm presently an executive director with the John Maxwell team, where I've been certified as a speaker, trainer, and coach. My initial thought as I was preparing this presentation was to take a look at the various roles women have served in throughout the ages. Now I'm going to date myself by telling you that one of my favorite childhood memories evolves around a weekly television show that I grew up watching called Little House on the Prairie. In that show, you would have seen a very early look at the role of women, specifically in the pioneering days of our country, but I believe that this would hold true around the world at some time in history, where women's primary role was that of rearing children and serving alongside her husband in support of the family farm, whether laboring in the fields, rearing the children, cooking the meals, etc. Women weren't allowed to vote yet and had little to no paid employment outside the home. But moving on to the female in the center of this slide, we come to live an iconic figure known as Rosie the Riveter. In the United States during World War II, women were allowed into the workforce to help support the war effort in a variety of non-traditional roles, doing whatever was needed to keep the supply chain going for goods and services, with the primary focus of, supplies for the war itself. And finally, in more recent years, we would learn of yet more marginalized women in the workforce, that of female minorities. One of my favorite displays of this came to us in a recent movie known as Hidden Figures, where several notable women of color made significant contributions in the completion of our earliest space missions. These Black female mathematicians were of the highest caliber and historically are on record as having completed some of the most complex trajectory computations for the early days in NASA's space travel. Okay, now that we've had our Women in History lesson behind us, well, U.S. history, that is, let's take a look at some of the other many indicators or qualities of women in leadership. I'd like to start by asking for some audience participation. Now, if we were in the same room together, I'd have you all pull out your phones, I'd give you an interactive code, and have you rank the following in the order of importance. But since we don't have that opportunity today, I'm going to ask you to hit pause on this webinar and rank the following 30 items in order of significance to you, perhaps highlighting your most important 10. I'll repeat that. The request is for you to choose your top 10 and then rank them in order of importance. Ready? Go ahead and hit pause and begin identifying your top 10. How did that go for you? No small task, was it? And my guess is, if we were in a conference room together or a lecture hall, you could turn to any one of your neighbors and find out that you would have differing ideas to some extent. Would you agree? In doing some research, I came across a plethora of ideas as to which are the most important traits for a female leader. At which point I asked the question, are these truly the most important traits for just female leaders? Let's take a look. Would the list of things you need to know as a female leader change if you were in a position of leadership within the business or corporate sector? What about politics or the nonprofit world? Would it change if you were in the tech industry or education? How about if you were a female leader in the healthcare industry? Some of the information I uncovered was data taken from the Pew Research Center and demonstrates responses to women versus men in politics. Apparently, 75% of those polled, men and women, felt that they were equally good leaders. The second graph asks if gender matters in a given field. And there is a clear trend of predominance depending on whether you're leading a large hospital or financial institution, or serve in the tech industry or professional sports. And lastly, this third graph looks at men and women in business. And of those polled, 80% felt both were equally good leaders in business. Now, this slide poses responses of both genders as well as generational views on women who want to reach a top position in business. In this first graph, the question is, when should she have children? Should she have them early on or wait until she's older? As well as the final graph, simply looking at the generational gap in viewpoints of women as it relates to being honest and ethical, as well as the importance of mentorship. My hope is that by now you too are seeing there's a vast amount of information and that there are differing viewpoints and broad expertise as what it is that women should know, be, or do in the role of leadership in the 21st century. The statistics are plentiful as it relates to inequity in pay, to the percentage of women in C-suite roles and above, as well as variance of women in the multitude of industries and so much more. In asking this question, what matters most, I'd like you to take a look back to the list of items you outlined earlier as your top 10. Given the field of study or area of expertise that you are in, does this fit? Do you think it would change for someone else? On this slide, I'd like to take a look at this list of 10. I chose this visual as I believe a number of the other indicators listed, the ones that we looked at previously, could come under or in some way be combined with those listed here. For example, if we determine that number 1, focus on we, not I, could we combine attributes listed on the earlier slide to include delegate or get to know your team? Or perhaps the indicators of empathy and curiosity from the earlier slide could fit in with listens to others on this slide. I'm sure we could find many more relatable indicators, but for the sake of time, I'd like to delve into what I believe is most important and that I'd like for you to have as a takeaway from our time together today. And that is specifically getting clarity on your who versus your do, as well as thinking into your legacy. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Now let's move into some of the meat of my belief as it relates to breaking through and what does it look like. As a school administrator, I would frequently host tours of our school and invite parents into enrolling their children with us. One of the favorite parts of my presentation had to do with the character development program that was woven into the curriculum and throughout the culture of our school. I talked a lot with staff and students alike about the importance of our who versus our do. I think oftentimes we confuse our identity with the work that we do or the title that we hold. I'm here to tell you, those can all be taken away. Your job can end, roles shift, as I'm sure you've been a witness to in this pandemic as an example. But our who, that stays with us. So I've listed just a few examples of character traits here, and I love to reference the work of Brené Brown. Are any of you familiar with her work? We're doing a book study on her book, Dare to Lead, at the Department of Education here in Colorado with a group that I'm working with. And one of my favorite chapters in this book has to do with this very topic, that of identifying our core beliefs, our values, those things that shape us and can help us to navigate the difficult waters of compromise. along with taking some time to identify your core values and beliefs, some ideal character traits that you wish to identify with and incorporate into your worldview. There are some ways in which you can see the fruit of those traits will begin to manifest in your world. That world may consist of your relationships, whether personal or professional. They may be demonstrated in your business dealings or ways that you interface within your community, or my favorite, and possibly the most important, within the four walls of your home. And I believe these traits are deeply correlated to your motives. As you endeavor to break through to that next level in your career or personal life, ask yourself, what's motivating me in this direction? Is it in alignment with who I say I am? Does it align with my values? Is this something that I will be pleased to be known for? And why? Finally, once you've determined your set of core values, you've developed that deeper understanding of self, and you can go about the work of growing. Personal development is critical in going to that next level, wherever you are. In the words of one of my top mentors, John Maxwell, he says that to grow yourself, you have to first know yourself. Get solid in your identity, and you can soar to those next levels. Additionally, when it comes to personal and professional development as a leader, you cannot give and you cannot lead out of an empty vessel. The importance of growing yourself as a leader allows you to pour into those whom you are leading. Next up is something I found in a Success Magazine article. Darren Hardy is one of the mentors I follow from a distance, and he's a renowned entrepreneur and former editor of Success Magazine. Let's take a look at these 5 suggested ideas on breaking through. I've added my own nuance to the content that was listed under each of these points beyond what the article states. So I would encourage you to look it up under the original article for the verbiage for each of these 5. But for this first one, I have to introduce you to one of the greats that I've been blessed to study along my journey, and that is Mr. Jim Rohn. If you've not yet discovered him, I urge you to do so, as he's considered to be one of the most influential thinkers of our time. He said, in essence, to number 1 in raising your standards, to do more, you have to become more. What is that little extra that you can give to get you a little bit closer to where you want to be it in your health, in your fitness, in your bank account, your relationships? Where can you turn it up just a few degrees to produce that next level of excellence that will take you to that next level? And make more mistakes. While that certainly doesn't sound like success material guidance, the reality is the more mistakes you make earlier on, the quicker you can attain your desired goal. I always encouraged, again, my staff and students alike, that failing is an integral part of learning, and so it is in breaking through to that next level. The next one is to know the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, and then get both. This really is about learning from those who've gone before and can teach you through their valuable experience, as well as the coach or the sponsor, that person in your corner who's advocating for your success and your upward mobility. I especially like this element, leverage your professional wheelhouse, as it captures the essence of your whole being, not just the current role that you may be in, but taking an inventory of all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities, the package of you, which creates your value add and strengthens your professional capacity. It speaks of digging deeper to see how to successfully incorporate more of what you know into that which you already do. And finally, network, delegate, and collaborate like a pro. Remember, it's never about you. Again, as my mentor and friend John Maxwell says, it takes teamwork to make the dream work. And finding those purposeful relationships, those people who can complement where you might fall short, they can augment those areas that aren't your strong suit, and that will create the best win-win for all. As I begin to wrap up today's presentation, I'd like to share a final couple of thoughts. It's really of the utmost importance to me that you hear this message. You are a treasure. Regardless of your status, be it as a female, a minority, or otherwise, you have immense value. And your value isn't found in your paycheck. It isn't found how high up you are on the corporate ladder or the title on your nameplate. Your value lies within. It's your character. It's how you live your life fully expressing the talents and gifts that you've been given to share with the world. There's a beautiful analogy I'd like to share with you, known as the dash. Forgive me if you're already familiar with it, but I feel it bears repeating as we look at this final segment that I'm titling Living Your Legacy. You see, I used to think of legacy as something that we left after we passed, like an inheritance to our children or our grandchildren. But in gaining a deeper understanding of the dash, I've come to realize that I can live my legacy versus leaving behind a legacy. Certainly, I'd like to do both, but as it relates to the dash, as in that space between the date of my birth and the date of my death, that dash represents the life lived in between. Ask yourself, how am I doing in this space in between? Am I using the gifts and talents I've been given to better humanity in some way? Am I making a difference for my family, my neighbor, my community? In what way am I making a difference? Because in all honesty, from all the research shows us, at the end of our days, we're not lamenting having spent more hours climbing that corporate ladder or wishing we'd have stashed a few more dollars in the bank account or driven some fancier car. We're wishing we'd have written that book or sang that song or started that project that we knew was going to put a dent in the universe and spent more time living intentionally with the ones we love the most. Which is why I included John's book here titled Intentional Living, because we have to take action to chart out the plan, to map out the course, to live the life we want to live. It won't happen accidentally any more than the female mathematicians serving as computers at NASA in the early 60s who provided the correct course in launching John Glenn into his inaugural orbit around the Earth. So let me close with this. One of my favorite difference makers in our generation, if you're not familiar with Malala, may I introduce you to her as well. With my passion for education and in my brief visit to Afghanistan, the story of Malala captured my heart. She's a Pakistani female activist for education for boys and girls alike, despite being shot in the face at point-blank range by the Taliban in their efforts to quiet her. Fortunately, this act only enlarged her message to the world, and she became the youngest to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014. In addition to her quote, I leave you with one from one of the greatest leaders in U.S. history, Abraham Lincoln, who said, "Whatever you are, be a good one." Thank you. I'm Jerry Bisbee, and I'm extremely grateful to have had the opportunity to spend some time with you here today.